In the past few days, Sayadaw has talked about a verse that expresses a rule in the practice. Note at the very moment of arising, only then will we see sabhava for sure. And Sayadaw spoke about what is meant by noting at the very moment of arising. At the present, we observe at the present moment. And to observe, we use the full energy of virya, sati, and samadhi with continuous effort. When the mental powers, these three mental powers are fulfilled, then we come to know sabhava, true nature. To know this, just observe at the moment of arising. When virya, sati, and samadhi are in full energy, have full energy, then we come to know true nature. But at first, what we mostly are able to observe are the concepts of form or position or manner. Most of our time is spent observing these. We see the body and we see how it moves. We can't yet go beyond this at first, so we just have to keep on persevering. Yesterday, Sayadaw mentioned an analogy about eating, how when we eat food, we put a bite of food in our mouth and then we chew. And if we chew carefully, then the flavors that are in the food mix with our saliva, and we come to know the taste of the food. It might be sweet or sour or bitter, bland, salty, or hot. So the flavors are there. They're evident when we chew. But we can't really, if we just look at the morsel, we can't actually point out what the flavor is. But when we chew, we come to know them, if we chew carefully. So true nature, sabhava, is present in everything we experience, even down to the small details of opening and closing one's eyes. How they are present is that, for example, if we open our eyes and then stare, we just keep them open. If we keep our eyes open like that deliberately, the eyes become dry because they no longer have the blinking of the lids to lubricate them. And because the surface of the eye becomes dry, becomes tight, and it doesn't feel good. So we want to relieve this. There's the desire to relieve the discomfort by blinking. And due to that intention to blink, then blinking happens. And then again, when the eyes are open, and if they're kept open for some time, the surface of the eye becomes dry again, and tight and uncomfortable, and there's the desire again to blink, and then blinking occurs. So in this, mind and movement are occurring as a pair. They're occurring together. There's the intention or desire to close the eyes, and then the eyes close. There's the desire to open them, and then the eyes open. So in this example, nama and rupa, the mental and the physical, are occurring in pairs. And these are really there. This physical and mental phenomena are really there. To know them as they are, when opening and closing the eyes, when bending, when stretching, lifting, moving, placing, whatever action we perform, to know these, note at the very moment of arising. observe at the very moment of arising. And when we do this, we will really know the true nature. We will really know Sabhava. It can't be denied that this happens. No instruments are involved in our observation. Just mental energies which are developed to have full energy. At the start, we just see the form, the concept of form or the concept of position. But eventually we go past these, we go beyond these and see only the true nature. It becomes very clear. We don't see it mixed with anything else. So when one has faith that this can happen, and when age is on one side, one who notes persistently, makes effort consistently, such a one can reach this stage in 1 week. So Sayadaw says, please try. At the moment of rising, at the moment of falling, there is a group of physicality that contains there's two kinds of groups of rupa, and there's a kind of nama, a group of nama. So the group of rupa, the two groups are, there's the tangible object, pottabha, and then there's the receptor for that, which is spread throughout all the areas that are moist in the body. So the breath that goes into the body is the tangible element, the tangible air element. It's the striker. And the receptor is combined with other groups. So both of these, the striker and the base, are a collection of physicality. In the striker, there's a minimum of 8 kinds of different kinds of physical components. But Sayadaw is not going to confuse things by talking about this, just to know that there's physical elements, components grouped together in the striker and also in the base. And when the striker contacts the base, then there's 3 kinds of mentality that are evident. There's the knowing of the touch, knowing of the stiffness or tension or tightness, whatever it is that occurs in the rising. And then there's also the contact between the mind and the object, that sense of them meeting. This is called contact. And then also there's subtle feeling, good or bad, due to the contact. These are all mental. So the 3 that are most evident are the touch consciousness, knowing of the touch contact, and feeling. So these are what happens in the rising and in the falling. In the rising and in the falling, physical components are happening all together. These elements are coming together, but we call it rising. We label it as a whole, rising, and the falling, what occurs in the moment of falling, we label it as falling. We label it as the whole. So this is what is meant by observe at the very moment of arising. To observe, we need to apply the mental label. And when we observe a lot, then we come to know that there's the striker. We are aware of tension or stiffness, whatever it is that is striking. And then later on, as we observe more, we come to know the receptor element that makes the stiffness or tension apparent. And we also come to know the touch consciousness, knowing of the tension, knowing of the movement, knowing of the stiffness. And we come to know also the contact, the sense of contact, meeting between the mind and the object. And then also feeling. Sometimes it's pleasant due to a good contact, sometimes it's unpleasant. One can't see all of these three elements at once. Either, you can say 3 or 5. You can't see them all at once. You just see one at a time. We see whatever is most obvious to us in the moment of rising, in the moment of falling. But when we see that obvious one, we come to know the other parts that are involved, the other elements that are involved in the moment of rising, in the moment of falling. And an analogy for this is that imagine that there are 5 strands that are tied together at one end. So all these are submerged in either the earth or water, except for one. So there's one strand that's visible, and you see the one strand and you pull it. And when you pull it, you see there's not just one strand. It's got 4 other strands attached to it. So you see you pull one, but you get all 5. Although what you see when you pull it is just one. So this means we don't just get the strand that we pull, the one that we see on the surface of the earth or the surface of the water. We also get the other ones. They come out of the water and out of the earth. So this is similar to how we know when we observe the rising and the falling. We don't only come to know the stiffness or the tension that is obvious to us. We also come to know the other parts involved in that moment, which are the receptor element, and also the consciousness, contact, feeling. We come to know all the elements involved in the moment of rising, even though what we note is the obvious one, stiffness or tension. This is because, so how is it that we note just one thing, but we know the others? We didn't note them, so how did we come to know them? It's because when we know something, in the moment that we know, ignorance and knowledge can't exist in the same moment. So we automatically come to know all the other parts that are involved in the moment of rising when we note the part that's obvious to us. Sometimes yogis think about how do they come to know, how are they going to come to know all the parts when they just note rising or falling. So one simply has to note what arises. That's all. All the parts of the phenomena will become evident when one knows. The yogis only have one job, one responsibility, and that is to observe what arises with effort and aiming. And if one develops virya, sati, and samadhi, then one will come to know in stages. With the factors of virya, sati, and samadhi developed to have full energy, then what is expressed in the rule that Sayadaw mentioned, note at the very moment, observe at the very moment of arising, only then will you see sabhava for sure. Seeing sabhava for sure will occur. One who observes with the practice of Satipatthana, first of all knowing the benefits of Satipatthana and having just a general faith in the practice and having desire to get the benefits, with that, eventually, the courage to give up one's worldly pleasures, to give up one's worldly situation and come to a meditation center, that courage will arise and one will come to meditate. One will make the sacrifices needed to come to the center, and one will patiently endure, applying effort to note the arising object every time, starting with the basics, the main objects. So with the effort to observe the objects that arise, sati is present, sati arises. And when sati becomes good, it brings with it samadhi, collectedness of mind. The effort that is made is what repels, it doesn't let laziness and other defilements arise. And sati, mindfulness, is what protects the mind. It creates a blockade and makes the mind secure from the defilements. Samadhi holds the mind on the object. It's the quality of the mind falling collectedly on the object. So this is the method of Satipatthana. And in terms of jhana, if we're going to speak in terms of jhana, then what we need to do also is to aim to make the mind, to make our observation of the object accurate so that we don't miss it. We have to aim and focus the mind. So there's this quality of accurate aim, focused aim is needed. And when the object is in focus, when the mind and the object are concurrent, then there's subtle movement that the mind is moving subtly at that time. And this subtle movement makes the mind fresh. It makes the mind blossom. It makes this meditative mind blossom. Due to accurate aim, the mind rubs against the object. It contacts it directly. So in the moment of rising, when these qualities come together, we contact stiffness or tension. The mind, it's as though it rubs against these objects, the stiffness or tension. In the falling, the mind rubs against the qualities that are there, such as relaxation. So this is this quality of rubbing or having a direct hit. And it's similar to when we throw darts. If we throw a dart and it hits the bullseye, when we have that type of accuracy, we feel happy. We feel joy when we see how it hits the bullseye. And this is what arises in our mind too when we contact the object directly. Joy, piti, arises. And at first, it's just minor joy. It's just on a small scale. But if we continue to practice, it becomes larger and larger. It becomes a larger type of piti, joy. And this joy, piti, can overcome the rotten mind, which is called vyavada. Vyavada refers to qualities such as envy, jealousy, hatred, holding a grudge. These are all based in anger. So this is vyavada. Joy dispels this. And when vyavada is dispelled, then it's peaceful. So piti, the mind that has this piti, joy, is a peaceful mind. It's cool. So there's happiness, peaceful happiness, and this is called sukha. This arises following piti. With sukha, the mind doesn't scatter. There's no restlessness or remorse. Restlessness and worry are dispelled. And when there's the quality of rubbing the object, having a direct hit, then one becomes definite about what the object is. There's no wavering then, no wavering of the mind. The mind connects directly with stiffness or tension, and so one is definite about the objects that are seen. So wavering of the mind is dispelled. Piti dispels vyabhada, or the angry, rotten mind. And happiness, sukha, dispels the scattered mind. And the collectedness of mind, samadhi, the mind falling collectedly on the object, means that there's no running of the mind. It doesn't run anywhere due to sense desire. There's no wanting to see something good, to hear something good, smell, taste, touch something good. So in this moment of noting, we are free from the nivaranas, those qualities of mind which block wholesomeness. They block kusala. The nivaranas make the mind defiled. And the nivaranas also weaken knowledge, weaken the mind and weaken knowledge. So in each noting that contains these factors, then we are free of the nivaranas. Each time we note, the mind is clean. So this is how jhana, this is how the kusala mind arises due to jhanic factors. So seeing that this wholesome mind depends on jhanic factors in order to arise, Sayadaw says, don't be lax, be persistent in your practice. If one applies effort to note every arising object, then in one day you'll see a distinct difference. So if needless to say, in 1 week or 2 weeks, one is sure to see big differences. If there's no difference in the practice in a week, 2 weeks or more, it means that accurate aim is not present. Because accurate aim is not present, there's no quality of rubbing against the object. When there's no quality of rubbing against the object, contacting it directly, then there won't be any joy. Without joy or piti, we won't be free of vyabhada, the rotten mind. And without piti, there won't be sukha, or the peaceful happiness. Thus, the mind will become scattered. And without these two, there won't be samadhi. So without samadhi, there will be sense desire, kama chanda. As long as these factors, vyabhada, uddhacca, kocha, kama chanda, sense desire, and so on, as long as the nivaranas overwhelm one, it won't be easy to get the true Dhamma. One will simply be spending one's time, but it won't be possible to gain the true Dhamma. Starting with the rising and the falling. When the yogis make the effort to note every arising object, and they try to aim accurately each time, then with this accurate aim, no tina meda, no sloth and torpor arises. The mind is fresh. And with accurate aim, there comes the quality of rubbing, contacting stiffness or tension, vibration, contacting the object directly. one becomes definite about the object. There's no wavering of mind. When one has a direct hit on the object a lot, then one's mind becomes clear and full of faith. So one knows at that point, one knows one's own situation. One knows that one's noting is good. And one knows that one's able to observe. So one becomes joyous about this, and one feels things like gooseflesh, or maybe even like a jolt of lightning, or waves. One might feel this type of thing, and these are characteristics of minor piti, joy that occurs, a kind of a small-scale joy. And if one continues one's practice till it becomes very good, then one will feel a strong joy. And the body, for example, may feel very light. And when one walks, it may feel like you're floating. And when one does sitting, at the end of the sitting, one won't want to open one's eyes because of the good feeling that is pervading the whole body. This is called paranapiti, pervasive joy. So if one's observation is a bit good, then one will have a small amount of joy. And if one's observation is quite good, then one will have a lot of joy. And this joy pulls one along in the practice. In following joy, there's also passaddhi, calm. The body and mind becomes still. And also sukha, or happiness. And then one feels quite satisfied regarding the work that one is doing and the results. And one is motivated because one feels that one can get even more good things by continuing the practice. One understands that this is the path, and one makes one's awareness, one's observation continuous. So in sitting down, going from standing to sitting down, one does so slowly and sees the series of intentions, the series of physical events that are involved in sitting down. And coming to a complete sitting down posture, the legs bent and the upper body upright, one notes it as sitting, and then rising, falling, sitting. Sometimes one notes like that. Mixing in the sitting posture, taking in the whole sitting posture as an object, and then touching. When there's the feeling of touching, one may feel fleeting vibrations through at the moment of touching. So one may note rising, falling, sitting, and touching. And with each noting, the happiness keeps on arising. So these feelings of joy and happiness pull one along in the practice, keep one wanting to go further and further. If these feelings don't arise, if these types of good experiences don't arise, then one becomes bored with the practice. If one's practice just stays at the same level, one feels bored, and then one feels dejected, and then one lets one's effort drop, one feels dissatisfied, and so on. And so many unwholesome mind states can come in. Sayadaw says, please try not to let that happen. So at this stage, one can note easily. One's noting is good. Samadhi occurs, one noting after another. And the object arises, accurate aim is there, the mind falls collectedly on the object. So there's no sense desire, kama chanda, arising. And then one comes to feel, oh, this is so good. One feels a lot of faith in the practice. And one is able to note continuously, easily. And one is afraid to miss a single noting at this point. One doesn't want to let any kilesas in, so one doesn't want to have the smallest gap in one's noting. These qualities these wholesome qualities are really strong in one's mind. So one protects one's mindfulness, one's sati. And when one sees an object that's enticing, no greed will arise. When one sees a hateful or despicable object, no dosa, no anger will arise. The mind is simply wholesome and pure in relation to whatever object arises. So at this point, both the mind and the body become calm, tranquil. And both the mind and the body become gentle. And they also the mind and body become capable, very able to note. And the mind becomes quite upright. Both mind and body are very upright. So all these qualities of mind, these dhammas which beautify the mind, gather together in one's being. And at this point, one is extremely motivated to continue the practice, and one's life is assured. Sayadaw will explain about how this happens tomorrow. That's all for today.